What is going on YouTube? Sirs TCG here, coming at you with a deck profile that I just took to locals this week, and it was Kashtearlament, a fusion between the Tearlament strategy and the Kashtearlament strategy. In hindsight, this deck doesn't seem like it should go together well, but it kinda does, and I'm gonna show you a couple cards that go together with it pretty well later on in this video. I had a lot of fun playing this deck. I just kind of threw it together at the last minute just to kind of see how it would play, and I kind of enjoyed it actually. And I really enjoyed the boards it could make, what it could push through, the interactions between my opponents and my cards, and I just thought it was a lot of fun, and I thought I would share that with you. If you want to see more deck profiles like this, leave a like, comment down below, and let's get started with the deck profile. Starting with the monster lineup, we're going to run the 3 copies of Tearlament's Rhinoheart, the 3 other Tearlament's cards that fuse, and 3 copies of Tearlament's Kashtearlament. These are kind of the main cards in the deck, the core I would say. The ratios aren't negotiable, you have to run all 9 of these cards. The next monster lineup we're going to be doing is 1 copy of Shaddoll Beast and 1 copy of Hell Shaddoll Hollow, and we are running a small danger package with 2 Nessies and 1 Mothman. Nessies are great because they're Aquas and Darks, so they jive pretty well. Free discard, free draw. The Shaddoll stuff lets you draw, mill, and you can get into Winda. The next cards we're playing are 1 of each of the Shufflers, we're playing 1 copy of Destrudo, and we're playing 1 copy of Night Sword Serpent. The Night Sword Serpent's nice because if I see it in my hand, I can discard it off something like Shiren, it can special summon itself. Destrudo helps you get into Barone or any other of your Synchro plays, and the Shufflers are the Shufflers. Now is the really fun part of the monster lineup. We're playing 3 copies of Fenrir. It searches for your Tearlament's Kashtearlament and your other Kashtearlament monsters, such as your triple copies of Unicorn and your 1 copy of Riseheart. I'm doing this to get into my Exceed line, or just if my opponent is interrupting my tier lines, or if I start with some of the cash monsters, I can go into more so like a pure cash line first. I really liked this ratio and what this brought to the Tearlament's deck. It was fun starting off with a special summon of Unicorn and kind of going through a little bit of the Kashtearlament line first, and then hitting my opponent with some of the Tearlament's cards after. I really enjoyed setting up a copy of Birth to resurrect the Tearlament's Kashtearlament that I would either mill or banish off of whatever. Or if I wanted to banish something off of Riseheart, I could summon it back with Birth. But I always waited until I did my fusion plays or my link plays first before committing to something like special summoning Riseheart. Getting into some of the rank 7 plays helped a lot, because sometimes I would end on a rank 7 and then the rest of the tier board, and it felt really good. Moving on to the spells, we played triple copies of Perlarino, 1 copy of Raitsoth. Pretty standard. I guess the Raitsoth isn't too standard, but we're using it to search any of the Kashtearlament monsters, including Tier Cash, Unicorn, Fenrir, and Riseheart. Next up, we're playing 2 copies of Tearlament's Scream, 1 copy of Tearlament's Grief, and 1 copy of Tearlament's Heartbeat. We're trying to max out on the mills as much as possible because we're playing a bunch of these Kashtearlament monsters in the deck as well. So these cards really help you plus when they're milled if you have those cards in your graveyard or banished. Plus they're also good utility cards to have in case you need to out something or you need to extend your plays. Heartbeat helps you with your back row. Grief helps you summon a monster and send one from the field in order to either fuse or mill. Next up, we're playing triple copies of Super Polymerization, 1 copy of Kashtearlament Theosis, and 1 copy of Kashtearlament Birth. Theosis and Birth performed better than I thought they would, and there's some hidden synergy with the deck because there's so much banishing. You can banish your Birth, and after you use Theosis, you can use Tearlament's Kashtearlament to summon itself by banishing Theosis. Then you can go chainlink 1 tier cash, chainlink 2 Theosis, grab Birth. Now you have Birth on the field as well as some of your Tearlament's plays. But you have to make sure that you're using the Theosis or you're using the effects that lock you into Exceeds after you use some of your fusion plays or your typical Tearlament's plays. All in all, I thought that this was actually really powerful, ending with a Birth on the field, 1 of the planets, whether that be Pressured or Perlarino, as well as a Scream, and a fusion between a half tier board and a half Kashtearlament board. There were times where I ended on SP, Shangri-Ira, Fenrir, Kaleido Heart, Birth, Scream, and it was just a lot for my opponent to deal with. And it's just really fun being able to freestyle this deck because you don't know what lines you're getting into until you mill something, unless you're opening some of your Kashtearlament cards. To round out the main deck, we're playing 2 copies of Tearlament's Celiac, one copy of Tearlament's Meta Noise, one copy of Tearlament's Crime, and the honorary Tearlament's card is one copy of Trivikarma. You want to max out on as many of the engine cards as possible. I really enjoyed playing Crime in the main deck because I'm not scared to banish things now with my Kashtearlament cards. I can always recur it back if I mill Crime or get the Crime effect to bring back a banished monster. Meta Noise helps you plus it's also a nice Book of Moon, and it sends one from the deck. And Sullyx just a really good negate, sending one from your field to the graveyard. Most of the time I was sending Kaleido Heart to reborn it back to shuffle something as another form of interruption. All in all, the deck list is about 43 cards. Moving on to the extra deck, we're playing one copy of Kaleido Heart, one copy of Garura, one copy of Predoplant Dragstapelia, one copy of Mud Dragon, and the one copy of El Shadal Winda. All of these fusions came up almost every game. All of them were clutch, including the Super Poly ones. Nobody's really expecting Winda right now, so there's not as much playing around it. And a lot of the times I was making Winda on turn 0, based on having Havness in my hand, milling things, or summoning Tearlament's Kashtearlament to mill as well. It's a very oppressive card. All of these cards do a lot of work in this deck. There's so many ways to get to them all, so it makes life easy. Next up is the Link lineup. We're playing the one copy of SP Little Knight, the one copy of Sprite Sprint so you can get your Merly into the graveyard, and one copy of Barricade Board Blocker. After I had set up a board with Birth and Scream and a field spell, being able to make Barricade Board in order to protect your face-up spells is just another annoying thing that your opponent has to deal with. I went into this a few times, also to discard and add one in the end phase, and it really just helped you with that card economy and helped protect your board. Next up, we're going into the Synchro lineup. I was running one copy of Ancient Fairy Dragon, one copy of Visas Amritara, and the one copy of Baron de Fleur. Ancient Fairy Dragon and Amritara were kind of funny. I didn't really go into them a lot, but the times that I did, it helped a lot. If I opened a Pressured Planet, was able to mill a Destrudo, get into my Ancient Fairy to get into my Perla Rhino, or if I was able to make Amritara as my Synchro 8 to also get into Perla Rhino, it helped out a lot, and then I could link off into something like an SP for an extra point of interruption. These were all great. You could probably cut the Ancient Fairy Dragon and the Amritara for something else, but I thought that they were really fun to play with. Onto the Exceed lineup, it wouldn't be a Tearlament's deck if you weren't running a Bahamut Toad package and a Time Thief Redoer. But the last card I'm running is the Shangri-Ira. Bahamut Toad speaks for itself. It gives you an Omni Negate. The Night Sword Serpent helps you get into this as well, along with the Mud Dragon. Time Thief Redoer helps fuse on your opponent's turn and steals cards from their deck. And the Shangri-Ira came in pretty clutch when I made it. I would either have my choice to summon a Fenrir from my deck, or if I had Scream on my field in the standby, I could summon my Tearlament's Kashtearlament from the deck, and I was able to mill 6 in my opponent's standby to further fuse if I had to, or to just load my graveyard up with follow-up cards or shufflers, etc. Shangri-Ira was a lot of fun to leave on the field with all the rest of my Tearlament's end board pieces, because it kind of felt unfair in some scenarios. That's it for the extra deck. We're going to move to the side deck now. We're playing 2 copies of Gameciel, the Sea Turtle Kaiju, and we're playing a copy of Scareclaw Kashtearlament to help out some problem cards as well. You're playing so many cash cards, and you kind of want to banish your Theosis if you have some stuff banished, so I thought Scareclaw Kashtearlament was a perfect little complement to this deck. We're playing the 2 copies of Lightning Storm and 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster for some removal. We are on 5 copies of the Talents and Thrust package, 3 copies of Talents and 2 copies of Thrust. We're playing 1 copy of Volcanic Scattershot for time. We're playing 1 copy of Red Eye's Flare Metal Dragon for time. And we're playing a copy of Gagaga Cowboy for time. Because you're playing a Tearlament deck, it's going to take a long time for your duels to finish. There was only 1 match that was quick for me. The rest of them went all the way to the 45-minute mark. I was happy to have all of these time cards in my extra for certain scenarios, whether I wanted to mill Scattershot, make Flare Metal to keep burning my opponent, or Cowboy for game is always a good time. And the last card I'm running in the side is 1 copy of Guilty Gearfried for the Super Poly target. You never know when you're going to run into a Baron SP combination. There are certain situations where this card can definitely come up. It never did for me, so you could put something else in your side deck to replace this card. And that's the deck profile today, a little more short and sweet than the previous one. If you enjoyed this deck profile or you want to see a little more hybrid deck profiles, something a little off meta, leave a like, comment down below and let me know. I'm going to be playing around with a bunch of different decks in the coming weeks, and I'm excited to share them with you and how they perform at my locals. This is Sirs TCG. Until next time.